But first, some of the news that we've been covering at the Electronic Intifada. At least 20 people, including elders and children, have died as a result of Israel's accelerating engineered starvation of the Gaza Strip. The Palestinian Health Ministry reported on Wednesday that those 20 counted deaths reflect only those who were able to reach hospitals. Quote, "We believe that dozens are dying silently as a result of starvation without reaching hospitals," said the ministry's spokesperson, Dr. 𝐓𝐡𝐞 𝐄𝐥𝐞𝐜 He added earlier in the day on Wednesday that, quote, "The famine is deepening and will claim thousands of citizens if the aggression is not stopped and humanitarian and medical aid does not immediately enter." The Israeli army has not stopped shelling and sniping Palestinians waiting for food trucks and humanitarian aid in northern Gaza. Last Thursday, February 29th, as Maureen Claire Murphy reported, 112 Palestinians were killed and another 760 injured after Israeli forces opened fire toward Palestinians who had gathered to receive food aid in Gaza City. Quote, "Hunger is particularly acute in the bombed-out northern half of Gaza, including Gaza City, where hundreds of thousands of Palestinians remain after Israel ordered the forced displacement of people from the area months earlier," Maureen reports. Quote, "Palestinians in the north of Gaza are now starving as Israel has prevented the UN from delivering aid there for more than a month." The food aid massacre in Gaza City is a quote, "flagrant violation of international humanitarian law and fully goes against the International Court of Justice's provisional measures ordering Israel to halt genocidal actions," said Petra de Sutter, a deputy prime minister in Belgium, last Thursday. The Geneva-based Euromed Human Rights Monitor said that at around 4:30 a.m. on February 29th, Israeli tanks shelled, quote, "a crowd of thousands of hungry civilians who had been waiting hours for aid trucks to arrive." Maureen Claire Murphy adds in her report that, quote, "the rights group has documented previous cases in which Israeli troops opened fire toward and killed people awaiting aid." Daniel Hagari, the chief Israeli military spokesperson, said during a press conference that the trucks were part of a convoy carrying aid from Egypt that was screened at the Kerem Shalom crossing, quote, "and then entered Gaza for distribution by private contractors." He claimed that tanks were present to, quote, "secure the humanitarian corridor for the aid convoy," and that troops, quote, "cautiously tried to disperse people," as he described as, quote, "a mob," who rushed the trucks with a few warning shots. Hagari attempted to deflect responsibility by saying that the tank commander, quote, "decided to retreat to avoid harm to the thousands of Gazans that were there," and claimed that no Israeli military strike was conducted toward the aid convoy. But as Maureen reports, the massacre was applauded by Israeli Public Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir and celebrated on popular Hebrew-language Telegram channels. A majority of Jewish Israelis opposed the transfer of humanitarian aid to Gaza. In a statement published on its Telegram channel, Hamas rejected the Israeli spokesperson's claims as baseless lies intended, quote, "to cover up this heinous crime and to evade widespread international condemnation." Ashraf al-Qadra, spokesperson for the Palestinian Health Ministry in Gaza, accused Israel of carrying out a premeditated massacre. Read more about last Thursday's flour bag massacre in Maureen Claire Murphy's report, "Palestinians Seeking Food Aid Killed as Israel Starves Gaza," on electronicintifada.net. Since last Thursday's massacre, Israel continued killing starving Palestinians waiting for food trucks in northern Gaza. On Monday, the Palestinian Health Ministry reported that Israeli forces committed a massacre in Gaza City, leaving dozens who were waiting for food trucks wounded and dead. At least 9 people were killed and many others were wounded in an Israeli strike on an aid distribution truck in Deir el-Balah earlier in the day. Al Jazeera's Tarek Abu Azoum, reporting from Rafah, said, quote, "It seems that the Israeli military is right now targeting people who are waiting desperately for food, for anything to survive." And yesterday, at least 4 people were killed and dozens were wounded when Israeli tanks opened fire on people gathering for aid deliveries on Rashid Street in Gaza City. Earlier in the day, the United Nations World Food Programme announced that it had attempted to resume delivering aid to northern Gaza, sending more than a dozen trucks. But Israeli occupation forces stopped the convoy at the Wadi Gaza checkpoint, separating northern and southern Gaza, for several hours before refusing entry. The World Food Programme said that, quote, airdrops are only a last resort to reach northern Gaza. Road routes are the only way to bring in the large quantities of food desperately needed to avert famine. For comparison, this week's airdrops only consisted of 6 tons of food, while this week's failed 14-truck convoy would have consisted of 200 tons. Ali Abunimah and Tamara Nassar reported on Sunday that the airdrops, in which the US, Egypt, the UK, the Netherlands, the United Arab Emirates, France, and Jordan have participated, instead of forcing Israel to open the crossings and stop preventing aid trucks from unloading their cargo safely, are being marketed, quote, as benevolent assistance amounting to humanitarian aid theater that does nothing to end the systematic and intentional campaign of starvation Israel and its American and European allies, with the complicity of regional regimes, are waging against Palestinians. The effect, whether intentional or not, is to relieve Israel and its backers of pressure to lift the total siege Tel Aviv has imposed on the coastal enclave, with the clear intent of causing maximum suffering and death to as many people as possible, Ali and Tamara write. They add that, quote, Tel Aviv knows that in practical terms, these drops will not substantially interfere with its policy of deliberately starving Palestinians to death, but it is happy with the propaganda imagery falsely suggesting that people in Gaza are receiving significant assistance. COGAT, the bureaucratic arm of Israel's military occupation, bragged last week that, quote, an airdrop operation successfully delivered 160 packages of food and medical supplies to residents of southern Gaza and to the Jordanian field hospital in Khan Yunis. Ali and Tamara write that, quote, in addition to preventing all but a handful of aid trucks from entering Gaza, Tel Aviv is allowing mobs of Zionist fanatics to stage rallies blocking aid trucks carrying vital supplies from entering Gaza. These genocidal racists are encamped in tents and enjoy the protection of the Israeli army. They are even hosting outdoor dance parties. For more, read Ali Abunimah and Tamara Nassar's latest feature, Demeaning Airdrops Over Gaza Are Humanitarian Aid Theater, on electronicintifada.net. Meanwhile, the United Nations Women's Agency reports that, quote, an estimated 9,000 women have been reportedly killed by Israeli forces in Gaza to date. This figure is likely an underestimate, as many more women are reported to be dead under the rubble. The UN Women's Report adds that, quote, every day the war in Gaza continues. At the current rate, an average of 63 women will continue to be killed. An estimated 37 mothers are killed every day, leaving their families devastated and their children with diminished protection. More than 4 out of 5 women, or 84%, report that their family eats half or less of the food they used to before the war began, with mothers and adult women being those tasked with sourcing food, yet eating last, less, and least than everyone else. The Geneva-based Euro-Mediterranean Human Rights Monitor has released a new report documenting how Israeli tanks have deliberately run over dozens of Palestinian civilians alive. The human rights group documented the Israeli army's killing of a Palestinian man, quote, who was deliberately run over in Gaza City's 𝐓𝐡𝐞 neighborhood on February 29th after he was arrested. The man was subjected to harsh interrogation by members of the Israeli army, who bound his hands with plastic zip tie handcuffs before running him over with a military vehicle from the bottom to the top of his body. The victim's mutilated body and the surrounding area bear obvious signs that a military bulldozer or tank was present, the report adds. Quote, it appears that the victim was purposefully stripped of his clothes as he was seen wearing only his underwear at the time of his death. Euromed Monitor explained that this killing was just the latest in a series of violations that include the destruction of civilian property in Gaza. These acts, the group said, quote, are part of a larger Israeli effort to dehumanize every Palestinian in the Gaza Strip in order to justify and normalize the crimes being committed against them. Crushing civilians with tanks is just one of the many cruel ways the Israeli army murders Palestinians in the Gaza Strip, disregarding their humanity, suffering, and dignity. The Tel Aviv newspaper Haaretz reported this week that the Israeli army is using robotic dogs and self-driving militarized bulldozers in the Gaza Strip. Quote, in an effort to avoid harming soldiers and dogs, the IDF has been experimenting with the use of robots and remote-controlled dogs in the Gaza war. Most of the tests have been with a robot dog, which is also equipped with a drone and can replace or reinforce the 𝐓𝐡𝐞 units' dogs in certain situations. Unmanned, remote-controlled D9 bulldozers are also being used, Haaretz reports. The robot dog is made by Philadelphia-based Ghost Robotics and cost $130,000 each. Haaretz says that, quote, for the first time, the Panda, the remote-controlled D9 bulldozer, jointly developed by Israel Aerospace Industries subsidiary 𝐓𝐡𝐞 Systems, the IDF Ground Forces Technology Division, and the Defense Research and Development Directorate, has been used in the Gaza war. The D9 is remotely operated by a screen and a joystick to carry out missions to expose ground and demolish buildings without jeopardizing soldiers, end quote. And finally, Tamara Nassar reports that, quote, Israel is escalating its provocations against Palestinians in the occupied West Bank in the wake of the holy month of Ramadan, despite claims that it is attempting to prevent further escalation. Earlier this week, Israeli occupation forces conducted one of the largest military raids in Ramallah in years, Tamara reported. Quote, Palestinian children in the occupied West Bank bear the brunt for such military raids, where the unlawful killing of Palestinian children is the norm, according to Defense for Children International Palestine, which collects field reports on Israel's killing of children. Israeli troops and settlers have killed 27 Palestinian children in the occupied West Bank since the beginning of the year. This includes 2 teenage U.S. citizens. This past week, Tamara reports, Israeli forces killed 3 Palestinian children in the West Bank, including Mohammed Khalid Zaid, 13 years old, who was shot 3 times in his back and thigh while standing near a United Nations-run school by the entrance to the Jalazun refugee camp. When his friend, who was also injured, went to seek help, soldiers took Mohammed's body. An hour later, quote, they returned his body to the sidewalk near the entrance of the camp, reported Defense for Children International Palestine. Tamara also reports that, quote, on Wednesday, Israeli authorities approved tenders for thousands of homes in settlements across the occupied West Bank. Quote, this is the first time since June that the development of housing units in the West Bank have been advanced, Tel Aviv Daily Haaretz said. The head of the Israeli military's Central Command has also granted authorization for an Israeli outpost, illegal even under Israeli law, in the occupied West Bank to be transformed into a large settlement. If the plan is carried out, the outpost known as Mitzpeh Yehuda will be established as an official city settlement named Mishmar Yehuda. This would be an expansion of Israel's mega settlement of Ma'ale Adumim, adding more than 650 acres of stolen Palestinian land. For much more on the escalating situation in the occupied West Bank, read Tamara Nassar's latest report, Will Ramadan Tip the West Bank into Eruption, on electronicintifada.net.
Thanks for watching this video. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel, hit like, leave a comment. These engagements help us with the YouTube algorithm and it helps us to get around Silicon Valley censorship as much as possible. It does make a difference. You can also support our journalism by going to electronicintifada.net and clicking on Donate Now. Thank you.